Welcome to The Sound of Listening. This is a spacious podcast where we center ourselves as we explore the interconnectedness of politics, math, spirituality, science, emotions, psychology. We are rooted in spiritual centrism and political non duality. This podcast features intentional conversations with people who are across the political spectrum and who are from diverse cultural, philosophical, and spiritual backgrounds. Today, you're going to hear a beautiful conversation that I had with Andrea Taylor, a certified financial professional and life coach. Andrea supports people with building their financial futures and transforming their lives by creating winning environments. Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you so much for being here, Andrea. I'm so excited to talk about finances again and to talk about how we can have more hope with money and the different things that we can put into place in our lives as women and also just as working adults. And I think it's a really, really important topic for where we are right now globally and in our daily lives. The price of like everything is impacted these days, and so I'm really, really excited to talk about some practical things and then also some mindset shifts that are going to be important for people who are trying to work on their money and their investments and their future and their retirement and their children's college funds and house updates and whatever else they are going to be dreaming about. So, can you share a little bit about why money and financial literacy, self development, and self improvement, like where did all of that start mixing together for you? And how is that, important for you and this work that you're doing? And just a little bit about your story.
Yes. Well, first of all, Fee, thanks for having me again on here to talk about money. But just a little bit about myself. First of all, I've been in business for over 21 years plus, and I've done business for myself. I've done business with my husband, and then back to doing business for myself, and then back to doing business with my husband. And what I love about why I even started with myself was because I understand that, or I understood after waking up one morning, being an entrepreneur for years, and really just been stricken with fear like, oh my God, we've been in business for all this time, but we have not set aside money for retirement, quote unquote. And that is what woke me up, and not just realistically me waking up, but that's what woke me up mentally. Like, what are you doing as a business owner? And so we all know about 2020 when we were on lockdown, everyone was online, and I was doing something called Boss Babes. And I had my business partner at the time had invited now my upline in this business as a financial professional. But I remember her being on there talking about what she was doing as a financial professional, and she had invited me to some workshops, and the one that got my attention was the one on kids. So it's interesting how you bring up kids and all that, because we have three sons, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, I want to make sure that they're too set up for college if that's something they want to do. And I got on that call. After that call, I reached out to her, and been a life coach and dealing with women already. Money was always coming up in the conversation when we did the assessment. And I remember saying to her, I want to expand what I already do. What do I have to do to become licensed in this area to bring more of an asset to my clients? And she responded with, well, when the student is speaking, the teacher is listening. And I was like, okay, like, I want to get licensed, basically. And she said, okay, this is what you need to do. I got my license, and I began this work of education and development. So, kind of talking about some of the questions I wanted to make that you just asked, I wanted to make sure that I was able to bring more knowledge and education to my female clients. And what I know about the age right now, I'm in my late 40s, but at the time I was in my early 40s. And there is such a shift that takes place with women in general, whether they're going through divorce or their kids are, getting ready to graduate, or maybe they have graduated and they're starting college. And there's just a lot of insecurities and uncertainties, right? And so, I thought, wow, I'm actually right on time to be able to bring knowledge and wisdom and education and empowerment to women in general. And so, to kind of go back and answer one question in particularly about women, women, along with society, because we fall right in with society, one of the biggest suffering of our society as a whole today is not a lack of opportunities, but it's a lack of self doubt. It's a lack of low confidence. It's a lack of fear of what others think, right? And also, bad experiences. And women were no different. And when it hits us head on, like going through something like divorce, or maybe God forbid, you're a single mom and you don't have enough to support your kids. There's something that happens with our mindset that keeps us stuck. And I wanted to bring all of that to my women. So I know that was a long answer. I hope I answered the question, but if you want me to expand, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you so much. I definitely would love to hear more about the mindset piece that you were talking about, and also the self doubt and how that affects income, right? And how that affects money, and sort of your journey too within that, and how it shifted for you. And yeah, I'd love to hear about the mindset piece a little bit more.
Yeah, the mindset piece, you know, our brain is very powerful, right? And if you believe something about yourself, whether it's right or wrong, because you believe it, it's true in your mind, right? And so you begin to attract more of that energy in your life, and it keeps you stagnant where you don't progress, you won't move forward. And the biggest part of that is if you don't have a winning environment around you, then your ability to get beyond the blocks is even more prominent. So if you have people that are in your circle that are dealing with the same thing, sometimes women in general can get on their soapbox, and it's like, I'm dealing with this, and then the friend goes, yeah, and I'm dealing with this, and it's almost like if you're not conscious, you begin to lick your wounds, and you're just, that energy is just getting more and more heightened, you know, and if you cannot push past that, then you're going to continue down that rabbit hole, and so for my own self, there was a time in my early 20s, actually my early 30s, mid 30s, I had a circle of women that's what they talked about. And I dealt with many age groups. I can talk to women that could be my mother, and I could talk to women that I can be their mother, and so, and then it was me in the middle with my peers, right? But I remember just thinking some of the things that I wanted to do in life that was going to shape my ability to thrive financially, was blocked by some of the things I came into agreement with other women, you know? And so now at this age and doing my own self-reflection, a lot of those women had to leave my life because I realized I couldn't take them with me. I couldn't grow with that type of community around me. Was it hurtful? Yes, because as women, we build these relationships, we get emotional with one another, and we get into what I call soul ties. You're my best friend, or, I'm here for life, or whatever these agreements are we get into. And by nature, we want to be loyal to our commitments, but from a mental standpoint, if they're not an asset to us, then it's going to stunt your growth. And I found out now that I look back at that time that though I wouldn't change it for the world because it was part of my growth, but now I know what to look for in relationships. And one of the things I learned when it comes to constantly transforming your mindset, renewing your mindset, um, so that you're not conforming to what's in your environment. One of the things I learned was, you know, and I learned this over this past weekend. I learned everyone should not have access to your mindset. And one of the things that really shook me and still have me chewing on it was we have passwords for everything, So why don't we have a password for our mind? And that was like, hello, a light bulb came on in a way that it's never come on before because we have much so many ways that people can get access to us, you know, whether they're texting, they're emailing, or maybe they're on social media platforms. And so it's easy to DM, it's easy to send a message, but you really have to like fireproof what you are allowing day to day in your mindset. And the world is so loud with that. So how can you really be authentic to yourself and all the creative ways that you can invite into your own environment when it comes to expanding the health of your mindset when you have all this noise around you.
Yeah, I feel like that is so true. And that's something I've experienced in a few different ways. And you shared about the winning environment and what is needed for that versus an environment that sort of drains you or drains your capacity or doesn't necessarily help you get to where you want to go. And, the conflict there of like having loyalty to people, but then also wanting growth for yourself, whether it's financially or in some other way. So what have you like learned or would want to share about what a winning environment for money looks like and how people can build that for themselves?
hmm Well, my company in general, we focus on how to put families on the right path to wealth creation. You know, for me, I've niched it where I deal with women primarily in every facet or season of their life, whether they're divorced, whether they're a wife with kids, or, you know, all the different dynamics that go along with that. And so one of them is teaching them how to save, and pay themselves 10% from their net paycheck, right? The second one is how to apply the three rules of money, learning about the money and how to apply that into their life. The other one is how to understand how compounding works in their life, how what risk looks like in their life, and then what is taxes? How do you protect yourself from all the taxes that go along, whether you're making a lot of money or you're not making a lot of money? Either way, we're going to pay taxes, right? And so, one of the things that I'd love to do is help the women plan or set goals, for themselves, how to secure the future that they want through income protection, through income replacement, and through generational wealth. So, with that in mind, just being able to further lead with education. And then on top of that, setting up a safe environment where they don't feel judged. When women have all that information in their life, a winning that creates that winning environment for them. That's letting them know there's possibilities. That's letting them know that I am your biggest cheerleader. I want to see you succeed. And with this information, that I'm empowering you with, if you do it, you will succeed. And so 9 times out of 10, and what I've been able to see is the joy that comes over the women's life. First and foremost, when they see what we're teaching already, they're like, wow, I need this. And what do I have to do to put this all in place? So the mentorship and the coaching that's what I love. That's my element, right? So to get into that situation with women is just something that lets me know I'm living out one, my calling, but I'm also walking in my purpose.
I love that, living out my calling and walking in my purpose. That's beautiful. Yeah, because I feel like that's so much the dream for so many of us is like being able to do that piece of things, you know. Yeah, I'm wondering, like, do you have any stories of like of women who have come in with like a certain situation and you've been part of what changed for them, or anything you've seen that, you know, over the years that you've been doing this, and the impact it's had on your clients' lives that you'd want to share?
Well, right now, so I have a few stories, so my brain is swimming. I'm gonna talk about one woman in particular that's gone through a divorce, that's going through a divorce. And I think the most devastating thing that women can go through when it comes to divorce is when they don't play a part in that part in the divorce, but when they are, and this is a real story, but for the protection of my client, I want to be as discreet as possible. But when you get when you're blindsided and you're served, divorce papers, and you were never aware, you didn't see it coming. And then you realize, wow, I let this person lead my life in every area, and I didn't get my own education. I didn't get my own, I didn't set myself up. And it's one of those delicate things, right? Because if you're an old school woman, you come from the old school environment and way of thinking, you're taught that the man is supposed to lead the home, which they do, they should, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't continue to educate yourself. And so one of the things that I, really took offense to watching this person, this lady go through that was, gosh, the fact that, you know, where's that fine line where you don't pour into yourself? You can have the degrees and everything, but if you say, I want to be submissive to my husband and I want my husband to lead and I'm going to just raise the kids and put my life on the back burner, and then when something like this happens, it shifts your whole world, and so being a part of that journey with this woman, I said, there's no woman that'll be left behind on my watch. Every woman would need to know how important it is to, one, understand how money works, and then two, start to build savings for your family, but also for yourself, because you have many women that, in different cultures too, that I've seen where the man all of a sudden or suddenly passed away, but they knew where everything was and the woman didn't know where anything was, you know? And it's like, oh, come on, ladies, we gotta have a conversation with our husbands to know, where is everything at? You know, I have another story of, and I'm trying to keep this as discreet, but I have another story of a person that's very close and dear to me. The husband passed away, and she didn't know where anything was. On top of that, she was not on any of the accounts. So she couldn't get access to any of the money that was in the accounts because she was not on any of the accounts. Right. So she had to now go to through the courts to get access to not just one account but several accounts, you know. And then there were safe deposit keys that she found but didn't know where they went to because there was no knowledge, there was no information, you know. So it's one of those things that I carry and that type of experience that I want women to understand. You're not, it doesn't make you a bad wife because you ask questions. It doesn't make you a bad wife to open those doors of communications because we don't know who's going to go first, when you're married. And so to not have yourself with all the knowing and the clarity, you do a dissatisfaction, not just to you, but to your kids. And then everything is impacted if you own a home. If you have cars that still have car notes, this is the reality that women will deal with or can face if they choose to not educate themselves and continue to just gain knowledge so that they can transform their life, whether they're married or not married. So I'm very passionate about that, as you can see. Um, and I hope I answered the question for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those stories are so powerful because I've also been in various degrees of unconsciousness with money throughout my life, and not knowing the ins and outs of different things and having to really intentionally learn it. And for me, it was scary sometimes to like look when I graduated from college. I think we talked about this last time. I think I was like $18,000 in credit card debt. And I just didn't want to look at it. I was just like, because I just used it to survive college, right? I just had to get through college. And so that's what ended up for me. And it was really, really scary to look at those numbers, to make a plan, and then to stick to the plan and pay it 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 off, which I thankfully did. But I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
like, off of that, if there is someone who is they're in a similar situation, or they're in a financial situation that is a little bit scary for them to even consider looking at. Or there's shame, right? For me, there was. For a long time, I didn't talk about this portion of the credit card debt. And now that, I'm 15 years out from it, I'm like, okay, now I can tell people that this was a thing that happened. But back then, I never told anybody. I carried it with me, and it really, really weighed on my mind. But it was my secret. It was like a dirty little secret, right? That I didn't want anybody to know. And so, my question is for anyone who's listening, who is in a similar place where it feels hopeless, or it feels gross, or you don't know what your friends are going to
Mhm.
say. You can't tell your family because you're so ashamed of what's happened and what you've done to survive, essentially. What would you say would be like a step that they could take, or like a small, maybe even mindset shift that they could practice, or a thought that they could maybe try to practice thinking, or something they could read, um, just to give them some hope that there is a path out? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Gosh, wow. That's a jam-packed question, so I'm going to do my best to answer it. And I love the question, because shame will definitely tear down, as they say, it would tear down a poor man's house. You know what I mean? You cannot let shame put you in this place of isolation where you feel like I cannot tell this dirty little secret because I'm going to be judged, right? That is probably the problem with society in general. People want to walk in this false humility that they got it all together. And sorry, life is not perfect. Nobody has it all together. If you was to really just ask every person you bring on your podcast, you know, to share their story, you would find that we all have struggled. So first and foremost, it's just removing that block to know that you're not alone, that no one's really teaching us about finances. No one's really coming to the doors, knocking on the door to say, let me give you education about finance, you know. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to let yourself know that this is temporary. And I think that's the other thing. We build these false illusions that we're stuck here, that there's no way around it. But with anything, same with working out, same with looking at the scale. No woman wants to look at the scale. And my background is the medical field. And so I was interning with my doctor who was an OBGYN. And I can't tell you how many women They would come in. I would stand there to take their weight, and they're pregnant. Okay, you're gonna gain weight. You're pregnant, and oh my God, some women would be traumatized. They would not want to look down at that scale. And part of what I do by nature, that's my gift, is I bring healing. I bring that space of there's no judgment, and they feel safe. And so one of the things was, listen, this is a part of what you're going through. There's no judgment. What that says to you is you have a healthy, growing baby inside you, right? And my doctor, he would look at me, he goes, "You're so good with these women." You know, he was like, automatically that shame and that discomfort would come off of them. No different with life in general in every area of your life. And that's what I love about being a life coach, is that I'm able to bring that perspective of this is temporary, it's temporary. And if you don't like it, change it. That's what life is all about, changing things. So, just with finances alone, because that's what we're talking about, I can apply this directly to myself and share a story. My husband and I, we were living in Canada. We moved back in our mid 20s and we bought a house. And when we bought our house, it was at the height of the world economy. And right when we bought it, the market crashed. And we bought this home, and I can tell you, when those bills started coming, we did not want to look at the bills. And I was just thinking, like, okay, somebody got to know what's going on. Somebody has to open the mail and look at what was going on. And when I tell you we were buried under all that, because um you had your property taxes, right? And then you had a supplement tax. And the property tax alone was about $8,000. But when the supplemental tax came, it was 12,000. I'm thinking like, where, what are we gonna do? You know? And I remember we had money put away, but I remember um talking to my husband and saying, well, we can pull this money and put it on all this, you know. And something dawned on me and said, like, why would you want to throw good money with bad money? This is just a really bad loan that we were put into. And this is not realistic for us, you know. And so we had to come to the terms of we need to short sell. We need to get out of this financial debt, you know. Um, and so what that time taught me now in my mid 40s or my late 40s, because we just bought a home, and what that experience taught me was, first of all, you have to be responsible and accountable for debt, right? You have to understand whether you have student loans, credit card debt, you know, it's there to, and I'll use credit cards as more of an example. That is there to show credibility. That is there to show responsibility, right? And so, what you have to be accountable for is to know that this is just the game of life that you have to play. Nobody likes credit cards. They think, oh, I'll pay it off and I'll cut it up. No, 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 no. You don't pay it off and cut it up. You're responsible, and you learn how to track your spending, as well as, build a healthy relationship with, okay, I need to buy something and pay it off. Buy something and pay it off. But when it comes to my own personal growth and when it came to me building my credit back up, I had to tell myself, don't go over 30% on your credit cards. Don't, you know, don't put yourself in a situation where you can't pay it off. It's not obtainable. It's out of reach. That's when you get into trouble, right? And don't feel like because someone is approaching you with some great product that you have to get it. If you don't have it, you don't have it, you know? So it's just being able to gain mental control of what's my role for my credit history? What is my role for my credit reputation, right? So I took that very seriously. And that was the real transformation when I bought that home, and also um, learning how to build credit. I One thing I understood was I didn't want credit cards. I didn't have credit cards for a long time. And that's when I realized, how in the world are you going to actually build credibility if you don't have anything? And now you're dealing with, student loans or just those type of debts that was on my credit report. And you can't run from it. You just can't run from it. And you have to say to yourself, I need to call all my creditors and I need to build a relationship and set goals for myself to pay things off. What I teach as a licensed professional is debt roll up, because people are genuinely afraid. They don't know how to deal with it. And they think, oh, well, I'll put $20 here, $20 there, $20 there. Well, with an APR of 14 or 21%, you're never going to pay it off. So what we teach, and what I love to teach women, is that you go with the smallest bill. You start to pay that bill off. You still pay your other creditors, right? You still pay that minimum balance, but you deal with one balance, the lowest balance at a time. Then you use that. Once you paid it off, you use that balance as a snowball. We call it the snowball effect. You take that which you was already paying and you apply it to the next debt. And then you use that as ammunition. And once you create that repetitiveness, you're being repetitive about it, but you're actually knocking down each debt that you have. And so where the winning spirit come in at, and where the confidence come in at, is when you're able to see, wow, I paid that off in 6 months. On to the next, you know? And then there is light at the end of the tunnel, right? So that's something that, being a licensed professional, that I pride myself on. Let's get you out of debt first. Let's look at your finances first. Let's see, where you're at, and then let's go from there. Now, the challenge with that is when I see the shame come over them and they don't want to talk about it, and I right away tell them, listen, this is a no judgment zone, like you're not going to be judged. I've been there. We've all been there, you know, and we perish from a lack of knowledge. If you don't want to um, be open minded towards learning new ways to transform your life, then I'm not the girl for you. I'm not the person for you. But if you are about doing that, then I am right there by your side and I want to see you win. And when they hear that, which is uncomfortable because you don't want to come off like you're arrogant, you know, but I want you to know that I'm really for you. And I find it defensive for you that shame is coming over you in this way that you can't remove the block. And, life keeps going, right? And you look back 10 years from now where maybe time is no longer on your side. And so all that blockage that you've had has stifled you from saving, because money is about time. It doesn't happen overnight. So, yeah, those are some things that I've learned with women in every facet of life, and then from a personal standpoint of my life.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I love what you said at the end about money is about time. I think that's so, so powerful, because we have to take the time to look at the money situation and then also put in the time to change the money situation and make it something that's working for us. There was one thing you mentioned about putting good money with bad money and sort of like figuring out when you had to, leave a situation or like cut losses and run. And I think that's something that we don't actually do enough as a society. I feel like we keep putting into broken things that are not working. And
Mhm.
I wonder if you could share a
Yes.
little bit more about how you did that and how you faced that, and what you would recommend to somebody who's debating and they know that something is hurting them financially and they're not able to separate from it or get clarity or find a path out, what would you say to somebody who's in that situation?
Yeah, and again, it's all about your mental state, right? And for my husband and I, we looked for solutions, you know. That was a terrible time when the market crashed. And I remember like watching the news, and the news didn't make it no better. They put out so much fear in the world that people didn't even want to spend money. They just the economy just stopped. People just didn't even want to spend money. And we were right up there with them in that time of our life. But, you know, the reality was one, due to lack of education for ourselves and coming from our realtor, we should have never been put in that situation. And then once we had to come into like our responsibility in that was because we weren't educated properly, we're in this situation, you know. But if we stay in this situation, we're going to dig ourselves in a deeper hole. You know what I mean? And that's no way to live. We were a young family and we were just really starting a family. We had our oldest and we had our second baby. That was probably 4 months at the time. So we were like, yeah, we got to get rid of this as quick as possible. So what do we do? And we explored like, what does it look like to short sell, right? And those were some things we explored. Now, in through that experience, you start to ask questions like we did. And we had people come into our house. Oh yeah, you can short sell this way, you can short sell that way. What we didn't understand, being so young too, was that there's sharks that want to capitalize on your ignorance. So we had people that came and said, "Oh, you got to do this. Oh, you got to do that." And in that situation, it was a loss all the way around because we had people that came that said, "Oh, you need to let your house go into foreclosure." And then we buy the house and then we'll short sell the house. No, they wanted to buy the house for their own capital gain. So that was a really bad situation for us. And we had to learn that the hard way. Um, but once we got from underneath it, what do you do at that point? You know, we had to learn from the lesson and we had to get a deeper understanding of what it looks like, you know, when it comes to owning things and your finances, getting a clear picture of how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, how much money can we really um, use as a tool to get us things, but not put us in a hole. You know what I mean? So that was a huge transformation for us. And I think for anyone that's listening, the quicker you can shed the fat, so to speak, the faster it is for you to put things behind you and progress. You know, so that was probably the biggest takeaway. How can we progress? You know, and it's something that I want to go back and touch on when you spoke to me just not too long ago. If you were to Google Chat GPT or research on Chat GPT or Google, one of the biggest questions that you can ask is, what is the biggest regret for Americans or Canadians or any country? What's the biggest regret? I'll say Americans go through, and they will come back and say to you, not saving enough. That is the biggest regret, you know. And it's one of those things now, even at the age I am, I look back and I go, back then I was so ashamed and so upset about things that happened earlier on. But now I'm so grateful for those life lessons because now I know what healthy money looks like for a person that has knowledge and what unhealthy money looks like to a person that don't have the knowledge, you know? And I'm so grateful because one thing that I can say, I am a believer. So one thing that I can say where I keep God first is that life gets better and better when you learn from your lessons and you're more prosperous. There's you're preserved. Time has been preserved when you can get it. When you don't get it, is where you run into real trouble. And that's where you see people in their 70s and in their 80s where they have to now go back to work. And we see them in places like Walmart. You know what I mean? Because they didn't take the time to learn. They didn't have people coming to them like what I get to do now is to go to people and teach them about financial education.
Preach. I'm just like all the things because I completely feel so deeply what you said. Life gets better and better if you learn the lessons that you need to learn. And I think that is absolutely true because learning it is like putting it into practice, right? You have to actually put it into practice. And I went through this last summer. I was tracking my spending and spending in a bunch of different categories. And one of the categories, I won't share which one yet because it's really embarrassing. It's so embarrassing for me still. But anyway, I will share the numbers. So the first month I tracked this category for my spending in the household, it was $4,000 literally that month. And I was like shocked. I was shocked and I was like, I cannot believe this. Like I couldn't believe it. I was like in like total disbelief. Okay. Like just how is this possible? And just by tracking that daily, and I made it actually more of like a morning ritual, and I still do it for the app that I use. Every morning I go through and tag
Mhm.
everything that came in from the previous day now. Because if I don't have the awareness, that's when I become unconscious, and that's when I repeat those really dysfunctional patterns, is what I've realized. So I have to keep the awareness really high. Anyway, so after a few months of tracking, that category came down to like, I think it came down to like 300 and something dollars for a few months, and now it's like pretty stable. And we had just moved, so it is like there were a lot of things around the move that were needed in the summer. And yeah, so there were things that were like needed, but now I've brought it down to a much more manageable like place monthly. But that first time I tracked it, I remember just feeling so bad about myself for like at least 4 days. I was like really, really down about this and about what I had let happen in my own life. Like there's nobody else who I could like even look at and be like, you, my parents, blah, 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 my best friend, blah, blah, like my sister, my partner. No, like I couldn't really look at anybody else. And facing that has been really challenging, but it's like led to a lot of growth. And that's why like money has been so important, like for me to really like understand the last few years of doing the business and trying to increase the revenue and trying to know what to do when the revenue increases. Where do you put that money as like a solopreneur or like entrepreneur or like small business owner? If you have contractors, like what percentage of something that you earn do you put aside, and like life insurance, or like getting my own retirement account set up for the business, which I still haven't done, right? So it's like those little things are
Yes.
still left in yeah, in the self-employment like realm, but I have much more awareness around the money piece. And so it's like each step kind of leads to the next step if we take the step, right? Like that's kind of what I figured out.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate what you said, and I feel like it's so wise and so true, and that there is hope, that we're not doomed just because we're thousands of dollars in the hole here. There are options out there, and what you said about education, it really is the thing that will liberate us, because your consciousness shifts
Mhm.
and you begin to see the world differently, and you know more, and when you know more you can do more and you can do better. But if you don't know more and you don't know better, then you can't really do better. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of, just reflect on that because it was very powerful for me what you were sharing, and very, very true in my like lived experience too.
I'm glad I was able to bring some perspective to that. Yes.
Is there anything else that you would like to share before we finish recording for today?
You know, I want to talk a little bit about time because I believe it's something to be highlighted in this conversation as a licensed financial professional. And that's what I see, it's what I see time and time again. with our young people because I mean, my background is mentoring young people too, and financial literacy, even in our girls empowerment nonprofit organization, financial literacy is a pillar, you know. And I think when you're young, you just think you have all this time, you know what I mean? And that life won't happen to you. But the more that I've lived, young people are not even exempt to different things that can happen in their life. You know, you got young girls getting breast cancer early. A lot of kids are getting colon cancer. Like these are things that it's just a part of our reality. You know, and so when you're young and you have time on your side, when it comes to what we teach in our company, compounding effect. Compounding, you're either going to pay it or you're going to learn how to use compounding, right? 9 times out of 10, we're paying compounding interest. You sit on your credit cards. You know, they're making money off of us all the time with the APR of 15, 21% with our credit cards. So, what I love to teach young people and women as well, if you learn now how to understand how money works, where to put your money, and how to get that compounding effect. When you look back at your life at 30, at 40, at 50, at 60, you can save a lot of money just by compounding and know where to put it, right? So have an open mind to knowledge so that you can grow effectively, so that you can really narrate the life that you want to narrate. You don't have to always learn the hard way. When you have people there that are bringing education, don't be so quick to turn a deaf ear to it. Because when you do that, you really stifle yourself. And then when you get to that age where you didn't plan for tomorrow, and let's say you outlived your money, and this would be the final story that I share, then you have to deal with being in your 70s and 80s. And God forbid, we're not asking the question to young people, but let's just put ourselves there. If I had to ask you the question, God forbid, fee, but if something was to happen to you, who would be your caregiver, right? No one's thinking that way. If you can't do 2 things out of 6 things that we do naturally, walking, sitting, combing our hair, all the things that we do, if you can't do 2 of those things, that means you need someone probably to take care of you, you know. And the one thing that I would want from myself, um, God forbid, if I'm ever in that situation, I would want my kids to have the freedom of not putting themselves in a financial burden to take care of me. I would want to know that I set myself up enough where they can say, Mom, you have the option to stay with us, or you have the option to live in a facility that you can afford. You know what I mean? That will really take care of you, not the ones that when you can't take care of yourself and the government puts you in these places. And now you're succumbed to, you know, being abused, not being taken care of properly, or not been in the best conditions, right? So when you know the true essence of money and the power that you have in terms of time and compounding your money, the best, I mean, what a compliment to you in your life when you're on the back end of your life. I'll just say that, you know? So that's what I think my joy come from in spreading knowledge and teaching about financial literacy, you know? So if I had to end the call right now, it would say, don't be naive to knowledge. Don't be naive. Don't be stuck by your shame. Use that messy part of your life to be your biggest message.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Yeah, I really
You're
appreciate you being
welcome.
here. For anyone who's listening, and Andrea's information will be in the description below, and you can check out everything from her. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.